Seems like you can watch pretty much any kids movie on streaming these days, except for that one that completely alienated its built-in fanbase and sank an entire franchise, and a few others. In the late 2010s, Disney's live-action division seemed to focus almost exclusively on remakes of its old animated films and sequels to big hits. One bizarre exception to this was the adaptation of the fantasy novel Artemis Fowl. The production was plagued with problems, including a hasty last-minute delay from an August 2019 release date to May 2020. Alas, that new date happened to land right in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic, which meant there would be no theatrical release for Artemis Fowl. The film ultimately got shuffled off to a Disney Plus launch on June 12th. It was greeted with dismal reviews and quickly vanished from the pop culture radar. 3 years later, though, Artemis Fowl unexpectedly returned to headlines when it was among a number of titles removed from Disney Plus in a cost-cutting move.
Scared, Artemis?
Little bit, but I prefer scared to dead.
But considering the movie's toxic reputation among both Fowl fans and the general public, it wasn't exactly like people were weeping in the street over the decision. Artemis Fowl wasn't the only Disney adaptation of a children's book to see its theatrical release plans capsized in 2020. Inspired by the true story of Ivan the Gorilla, the one and only Ivan was set for an August 2020 big screen opening before it ended up going straight to Disney Plus instead. Unlike Artemis Fowl, though, the one and only Ivan earned decent reviews and even scored a Best Visual Effects Oscar nomination.
Hi, I'm Ivan.
I'm not just any gorilla.
A little presumptuous, don't you think?
But in the immediate years after its release, the one and only Ivan largely went unnoticed. That is, until it became one of the many titles removed from Disney Plus. This seemed like a rather cruel end to Ivan's cinematic journey. Not only was it no longer available on streaming, but it hadn't even gotten a physical release. There is a silver lining, though. In September 2023, the one and only Ivan wound up on premium video on-demand services. For his follow-up to the Best Picture-winning Spotlight, director Tom McCarthy helmed Timmy Failure, Mistakes Were Made, a live-action Disney movie that he also wrote and produced. This adaptation of Stephen Pastis's Timmy Failure wasn't as inexplicable a choice for McCarthy as it may have seemed at first glance. He had previous writing credits on Disney-released movies like Up, $1 Million Arm, and Christopher Robin. Timmy Failure debuted on Disney Plus on February 7, 2020. Unlike Artemis Fowl and the one and only Ivan, Timmy Failure was made for the streaming platform. But neither that nor its relatively small budget could prevent Timmy from suffering the same fate of being removed from the streamer in May 2023. It was an especially disconcerting ending for a movie that was given a big screen premiere at the 2020 Sundance Film Festival. But with Disney cleaning house to save some bucks, Timmy Failure just couldn't avoid living down to his own name.
Mistakes were made.
Once scheduled to be a traditional theatrical release in April 2018, the Adam Devine starring Disney flick Magic Camp instead found itself stuck in limbo for years before it finally hit Disney Plus in August 2020. Part of that could have simply been the studio holding back projects for its streamer's first year of programming. Those sexual misconduct allegations leveled at co-star Jeffrey Tambor certainly didn't help. Either way, Magic Camp came and went without much notice from pretty much anyone, so it wasn't exactly surprising when it was one of the many projects removed from Disney Plus in May 2023. What was unusual, though, was Magic Camp's fate afterwards. Whereas Artemis Fowl, the one and only Ivan, and Timmy Failure all eventually ended up on premium video on-demand services, Magic Camp has remained in streaming limbo in the years since. Without a passionate fan base to rally around its fate, we can't help but assume that Magic Camp's disappearing act will remain permanent.
Sick burn.
Paramount Pictures had so much confidence in the animated film Rumble that the studio started advertising it almost a year before its planned January 2021 theatrical release with a trailer that played before the first Sonic the Hedgehog. All signs looked promising for this monster wrestling movie, but once COVID-19 shut down theaters in March 2020, release plans changed. Delayed release dates were announced for 2021 and then 2022, but Paramount ultimately decided that the theatrical marketplace wasn't kind enough to original animated features. With CBS All Access transforming into Paramount Plus in 2021, the streamer immediately needed family-friendly programming, so Rumble debuted as a Paramount Plus exclusive in December of that year in the hopes that it would catch on as a holiday season streaming treat. But it didn't quite work out that way, and in 2023, Rumble left Paramount Plus alongside other family-friendly titles tied to the Nickelodeon brand. This wasn't as devastating a loss as it could have been, since Rumble had been available on physical and digital home media since 2022. Even so, its disappearance from Paramount Plus with minimal fanfare stood in stark contrast to its original hype. Owen Wilson has enjoyed a fairly wide-ranging career, but 2022's Secret Headquarters asked audiences to view him in a whole new light, as a superhero. This film was designed from the ground up to appeal to a new generation of superhero movie fans, but it seems like that just wasn't what audiences were looking for. Once set for a theatrical release, Secret Headquarters instead dropped on Paramount Plus in August 2022. It wouldn't have any chance for supersized box office receipts, but the hope was that audiences could discover it for years to come on the streamer. Alas, that became a lot more difficult when Secret Headquarters was removed from Paramount Plus in the summer of 2023, less than a year after its debut. This development coincided with a slew of other Paramount Plus original films, family-friendly titles in particular, leaving the streamer, a signal that executives had decided to shift the platform's target demographics.
Wow.
At least Secret Headquarters is available on video on demand and physical media, thus ensuring that future generations can decide for themselves if Owen Wilson was a worthy superhero. The second adaptation of Roald Dahl's 1983 novel of the same name, the 2020 version of The Witches was once set for a high-profile October theatrical release date. Instead, it went straight to HBO Max after the COVID-19 pandemic shut down theaters. While Warner Brothers was willing to release Tenet and Wonder Woman 1984 in domestic theaters in 2020, The Witches was a different story, although it did hit the big screen in some international territories. Once those theatrical runs wrapped up, that was pretty much the last anyone really talked about The Witches. That is, until it was abruptly removed from HBO Max in North America. That happened in August 2022 when Warner Discovery began significantly overhauling the company and finding ways to trim costs, which included culling numerous offerings from the HBO Max library. The Witches had been available on DVD since June 2022, so there was still a way to watch it. Still, this was a perplexing outcome, considering the movie sacrificed a potentially lucrative theatrical run for a streaming home that didn't even last 2 years. And it was especially surprising when you consider that director Robert Zemeckis and stars Anne Hathaway and Octavia Spencer are all Oscar winners. One of the most drama-free instances of a streaming-exclusive kids movie losing its small-screen home is The Little Prince. This adaptation of the classic children's book of the same name was once set for a traditional domestic theatrical release from Paramount Pictures in March 2016. That never came to pass though, and the movie was instead released by Netflix in North America that August. In most of the rest of the world though, The Little Prince did play on the big screen as intended, and even ended up grossing nearly $100 million worldwide. The Little Prince remained on Netflix in North America for several years, but then in the summer of 2021, it vanished from the streamer.
I cannot play with you.
It was an inevitable end though, as Paramount had only licensed it to Netflix for a limited time. Once it had ownership again, the studio went ahead and gave The Little Prince a physical media release. Given these circumstances, the saga of The Little Prince's Netflix departure is much less infuriating than Disney Plus removing exclusive movies that can't be accessed anywhere else. In this case, it was simply time for The Little Prince to fly off elsewhere. Based on the YA novel of the same name, the jukebox musical Stargirl had the misfortune of hitting Disney Plus on March 13, 2020, just as the world was shutting down in response to COVID-19. With everyone's attention on pandemic-related news and higher-profile releases being rushed to streaming, Stargirl was basically background noise even for the most passionate Disney Plus subscriber. And yet, something clearly went right with Stargirl since Disney greenlit a sequel called Hollywood Stargirl that came out in June 2022. This technically made Stargirl one of the first original franchises produced by Disney Plus, which you might think would shield it from any ridiculous corporate shenanigans. That's not quite how it worked out though. Stargirl and Hollywood Stargirl were both removed during the big Disney Plus purge in May 2023. When the news broke, director Julia Hart took to social media to express how devastated she was, and that she interpreted it as a signal that Hollywood itself was rotten. She wrote, "I went around telling anyone who would listen that we should applaud studios for creating space for mid-budget humanistic stories on streaming. I'd like to take that back. This industry is broken. It's going to be basically impossible for movies like this to get made."
Making the first Stargirl movie was the best experience of my career as a filmmaker.
Hart went on to add, "This is why artists must focus on process. I had the time of my life, made lifelong friends, and provided for my family. I don't regret a thing. I bet a lot of people don't realize how much crew and actors rely on employers being able to view their previous work in order to secure future employment." The sci-fi adventure flick Crater spent years in development before it launched on Disney+. The project originated at Fox, which developed the movie with Sean Levy, although Kyle Patrick Alvarez would eventually step in as director. Disney inherited the film during its merger with Fox in March 2019, and the Mouse House released Crater to Disney Plus in May 2023, only for it to get pulled from the streamer after just 48 days.
You promised me you'd get out there, to the crater, like we talked about.
That wasn't anywhere near enough time for Crater to generate a fan base or anything resembling impressive viewership numbers in a crowded and competitive streaming ecosystem. It was nothing less than a devastating blow to everyone who worked on the film. At least it's since been released to premium video on demand. The adventure flick Togo was released to Disney Plus in December 2019. Based on a true story that takes place largely in 1925, the film stars Willem Dafoe as Leonard Seppala, whose trusty Siberian husky Togo is called upon to transport a serum for a diphtheria outbreak in Nome, Alaska. Much of Togo is predictable, but elements like Dafoe and Julianne Nicholson's performances and lively filmmaking from director Erikson Core make it a much better movie than you might expect.
Only one man and one dog can make that run.
While Togo could have easily worked as a theatrical release, it instead went straight to Disney Plus, making it one of the first original features to debut on the streamer. It actually survived the summer 2023 culling, but it didn't last much longer. It was ultimately removed from the streamer in fall 2024. Unfortunately, Togo has never been released on physical media and is currently unavailable through digital retailers. Somehow, a high-profile, inspirational true story starring a hero dog and a 4-time Oscar nominee now qualifies as lost media. This is the ultimate worst possible fate for any movie, but it's now all too common in the streaming era. No doubt about it, Togo deserved better.